Knock, knock. Scott, when you say your platform crashed, which one are you talking about? You talking about the room or are you talking about your trading Novia? Okay. Well, I hope you'll be okay. This is Novia chat room. If you can hear me and you have the slides in front of you, then you should be okay. All right, good evening, everyone. And we have a lot of information that we want to try to cover tonight. So let's get started. And we are recording this, and the recording will be available to you as soon as it's produced. And so you'll be able to play it over and over and over again. And so a couple things from what I call the housekeeping area. In the Globex room, and now we have a 24-hour chat room, but I'm going to talk mostly tonight about the Globex session. And here are some of the the points that I want to make about just using the room itself. We generally start doing updates around 5:15. The market opens, as you know, at 5 o'clock. I'll come on and give an overview of the day, talk about the market, the strategy that we're looking for. We'll also post on the whiteboard. Now in the chat room, if you look at the top, there are several tabs. You can go to the whiteboard and it'll basically summarize what we're trying to do, any trades or any notes, stops, targets, things of that nature. And then I'll come on again at 7:15, whether we have a trade on or not, and touch base, because that is 15 minutes after the Nikkei opens. And then after the Nikkei opens, the next big event for the room will be when the Hang Seng opens at 8:15. I'll do an update at 9:15. Now, generally speaking, and what we've learned, and we've tried to use text messaging, tweets, all sorts of other cute digital communication devices. And the problem with sending out text messages is that when you send out a bunch at one time on a regular basis, they don't always, as they say, send them out all in a group at the exact same time. They cache some of them, is what they call it in the industry. And so we had problems with text messaging. The tweets, can work okay, but if you'll just leave your speakers on in the chat room and know that, we're doing updates around 5:15 and 7:15 and what have you, you should be able to hear any kind of announcement or changes in a trade. Now, after the 9:15 update, what we generally will do is we will just do the typing in the room, and I'll communicate via typing because most households are asleep and they don't want my booming voice coming in over their speakers. So how that works is that I'm always in the room. I'm always watching the room. Even if I'm not talking, I'm there, I'm monitoring, I'm available. Now, I might, when you consider that we're up all night and I watch the markets during the day and work with the moderators during the day, because as you know, we have a 24-hour room, I might doze off for 45 minutes and catnap. I have this ability, and I'm not sure where it came from. I can sleep 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I'm good to go, if I can do that for hours. And so I've been able to do that since I was in college. And then, having 5 kids, I guess it just became a habit. But at any rate, that's kind of, the way we operate. The Globex at night is a 17-hour market. So, you don't want to sit there and listen to me talk. In fact, I don't know what I would say for 17 hours. So for the most part, we talk when we have something important to say, a change in a trade, change in the stop, change in the target. There's news. And the other folks in the room, as you've heard me say, and I am very proud of this, we have one of the friendliest chat rooms. They'll help you. They're great to trade with, and when you trade with other people of the same mindset that are following basically the same indicators and concepts that you are, it makes it a lot easier. And we have a group that will go out of their way to help you. And I think that's one of the great things about our chat room. Now, tonight we're going to try to cover a lot of material in a couple of hours. We're going to talk about the indicators, what I look for in a trade setup, the Greek isms. There are some slides in here that, for the most part, we really don't need to talk about. So if I skip over them, I'm not trying to rush. I'm just trying to get to what I think is important for you to know, because many of you in this $97 trial, you have purchased the course tonight, and I promise you that understanding the Globex will make you a better trader, will make you a better investor. That I know, because I've been doing it for a very long time and I've seen the results of it. But you are in a 24-hour chat room, and the benefits of that room is so that you have the flexibility to not only trade when it fits your schedule or your time of day that you like to trade the markets, but you can trade with different moderators with different philosophies, and we think that's huge. So I think, the real value in addition to tonight's course is the ability to join our chat room for 30 days to see how you like it. Now, you will, but real quick, because I've shown some of you in the slides, I go from 5 at night, unless we have a pre-market trade, which, I'll call before the close. Usually that's between quarter to 4 and quarter after to 4. You may want to monitor the chat room if we've had a huge move up or down, because we may put on an early trade before the close at 4:15. I'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the Greekisms. But generally speaking, the chat room in the Globex, we start at 5. I'll come on at 5:15. I'll do a generalization of what we saw in the market, what we're looking for. Then if I need to come on before 7:15, we'll talk. I'm in and out of the chat room in terms of talking the whole time. I'm always there monitoring it. Even if I go out, and there are sometimes, that I have meetings or events that I can't miss, I take a laptop with me, so I'm always watching the room and watching. Okay, that you can, I promise you. Now, again, we're not going to communicate in the chat room during the Globex session all night because it's 17 hours. But the guys during the day, and that starts with Frank at 5 in the morning, he goes till 7. That's Dr. Stanley. He has a PhD in psychology and is a professional trader. He teaches options, and he'll find you trades on the Russell and the NASDAQ and the Dow futures. He starts and goes from 7 in the morning, from 5 in the morning till 7 in the morning. Then Harry comes on about 8, and Dirty Harry goes till about 10. And then you have another moderator, generally Harry or West Coast Roy, that will call trades between 10 and about 11:30. Then you have John Andrews, who comes on and he does credit spreads, does a great job. All these guys, we have posted returns that we have someone now monitoring and keeping in the room. All of them are up. Then I come on. We have West Coast Roy, who will do Murray lines and volume profiles that most of the people in this room absolutely are fascinated by. It's a very complicated mathematical type of trading, but it's very learnable. It's easy to learn, and West Coast Roy is one of the best at it. And he talks about it as he calls trades. And then I start at 5 o'clock, and we do not call trades on Sundays. And you will also find out the reasoning for that a little later. I'll tell you why. So just kind of table that for a second. The room opens at 5 o'clock on Sunday. The projections for the markets and the dome are in the room, but we may not call trades unless there's been unusual news or activity. I'll come in the room on a Sunday night, and we'll see if there's a trade. We'll talk about what's going on, as I did this past Sunday when the futures opened down at 20:55. They closed, I'm trying to remember, maybe 2071. On Friday, they opened at 2055. Well, they didn't open at 20. They opened around 2062, dropped to 2055, and then rallied the rest of the night. All of it, obviously, on Greek news. So on Sunday nights, we don't have moderators calling trades in the room, but the room's open Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Through Thursday night, we're calling trades. Fridays, we try to give the guys a break on Fridays. Plus, the markets are usually more unpredictable on Fridays, especially Fridays of options expiration. But they're in and out of the room, and the guys are real good about being in the room even when they're not scheduled. Okay, so let's see. I will stop along the way tonight about every 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll take questions at that time. But real quick, while I have what's up here now, Paul, is the whiteboard always up to date? I try to keep it up to date. Gail, do you snore? My wife says yes, but hopefully the mic's off. In other words, you're ate up with this crap. I guess you could say that, Randy. I was a portfolio manager. I managed several hundred millions of dollars in my career. And that's how I got involved with the Globex. I was looking for a way to hedge portfolios, overnight in case something went wrong, which it always does. I call something goes bump in the night. And, I'm a light sleeper anyway, so I started following the Globex. And again, real quick, so I don't want to get too much into this because we only have so much time tonight. We had in the early days of the Globex, I'm talking about the original Globex, you had to purchase a Globex terminal. It was the only way that you could enter orders. There's a slide on this later, but let me just tell you a little bit about it now so you can see how this has evolved. And this particular computer cost you about $5,000 to obtain. That's if you were approved by the futures folks and the CME. You had to be first approved that you had the background and knowledge to have one. There was only maybe a dozen, originally in the country. We all knew each other. The majority of the original terminals were floor traders during the day that had these terminals at night. But, you could only enter orders on this terminal. Every button on there was designed to put in a bond order or an S&P order. Now, in the early days, I'm talking about the early 90s, you could only buy the big S&Ps. You could do all the currencies, of course, and you could buy, bonds and what have you. Now, today, any market you can possibly think of, if you want to short the Nikkei in Japan, you want to buy the DAX in Germany, you want to buy the FTSE in England. I mean, you couldn't do this in the early days. They're available for you to buy or sell, depending on what it is you're trying to do. So there's just not a market, and then there's some markets I've never even heard of, but it's all financial futures in the Globex at night. This is the fastest growing market that I know of in the industry. I mean, and I'm going by just the growth in volume. Now, somewhere around 2004, and we have a slide for this, they allowed what they called open access. So I want you to think about this. It's only been since 2004 that non-professionals or anyone with a laptop and a futures account could access this market. So you have to understand this is still a very young, very misunderstood marketplace. And if you don't believe me, just ask one of your brokers one day, or your investment advisor, financial advisor, whatever he's called in your case. Tell him, you opened a Globex account, or you want to open a Globex account, and wait to see the blank look that you're going to get when you tell him that. Ladies and gentlemen, by understanding this market, I'm not trying to sound egotistical, you're among a very elite group of people who trade. Because, for example, you can go to a party, and I've seen this, I've heard it, I've heard some of our members do it. I've even done it myself. You'll hear someone saying, well, I bought some Google or I have some Apple computer, and they're talking about the stocks they own, especially in a hot market. That's all they talk about at a party. The guys anyway are talking about their stocks when the markets are hot, or unless there's been some big news. But, and you go in there and say, yeah, I was watching the DAX last night. And they go, what's the DAX? Well, that's the futures on the German market. Or, when the euro did this, the DAX did that, or the Nikkei in Japan did, and they'll look at you like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Now, you do not, as you've heard me say, you do not have to become an international economist to learn this market. It's easy to learn. In fact, you've heard me say it many a time. If you want to learn to trade futures, this is the place to do it. And I'm going to try to go through all of the indicators, all of the Greek isms tonight. If we run over 2 hours, it's supposed to be 2 hours, so be it. And what you have right now is you have a trial to the room, and in that trial it allows you access to all of our documents, all of our archives, all of our webinars, recorded or otherwise, unlimited access. And then if we need to, we'll get back together again next Tuesday and we'll do this some more. But I want to try to get most of this in tonight on this recording. So these are the areas that we're going to try to cover tonight. And so this is what we're going to try to cover. Hopefully in the next couple of hours, like I said, if we run over, so be it. Okay. Now, I'm going to go through some of these really quick because, again, I think most of you know this. I don't want to waste a lot of time. The CME was a joint venture with Reuters, and they developed the Globex in the early 90s. And you just have to visualize this. There wasn't a manual. There weren't any instructions. There wasn't a booklet. There weren't any instructors. There was no one to mentor us because it was a brand new market. And, we had to learn this by doing. We had to learn it by paying our tuition. And I promise you, we paid our tuition to learn this market because we didn't know, what time the DAX opened or if it had an influence on the S&Ps, or we didn't know about any of the foreign markets. We didn't know about the Nikkei or the Hang Seng. All this is what, in my particular case, I've developed by specializing in trading in this market. So what I'm going to do is hopefully save you a lot of pain and misery and tuition and pass on to you the knowledge that I hope that I've gained since being in this market since 1992. Now, again, for the most part, I was managing money during the day. Like I said, I had over a few $100 million portfolios that I was managing. I was managing a broker-dealer, and then I would trade these markets and try to learn them at night and try to raise 5 kids. So you can imagine I stayed a pretty busy boy. Now, I sold my broker-dealer in 2005, and I'm semi-retired. I do some investment banking on the side, some real estate, but for the most part, this is what I do is Traders Den 24 and the Globex. This is what I do around the clock. And so when you do something a lot, hopefully you get good at it. Okay, so we're talking about the Globex or the overnight futures market. And what I maintain and what you should maintain is the day's trading. In other words, whether you're a stock trader, options trader, I don't care what you're trading. If you're investing or trading, the trading day starts at 5 o'clock in the evening Central Time. Again, everything we talk about will be on the Central Time Zone. So today's trading started at 5 o'clock this evening for Wednesday, okay? And then it goes till 4:15 tomorrow. So Wednesday's trading started at 5 this evening. Let me say it again. It goes till 4:15 tomorrow. Whether you're trading futures, equities, ETFs, it doesn't matter because this is where it starts and this is where you see the market start to move. And what happens tonight, what happens in the morning during the European session will let me say it again, will affect how the U.S. opens. Now, we all know there's news. It comes in around 7:30 most mornings, on the U.S. market. So a lot of times, based on what Europe's doing, that's how the U.S. is going to open, and you get a jump on the rest of the marketplace by knowing that. But like we had retail sales this morning, changed the market's tone a bit, and then we had the NIB numbers from the Small Business Bureau, and that changed the market's dynamics. We had J.P. Morgan's earnings that came in better than expected. Wells Fargo was a little worse than expected, and we had Johnson and Johnson a little better than expected. They set the tone for the market this morning. Okay, so the trading day starts at 5 p.m. and goes till 8:30. That's when the U.S. market opens, but it's seamless. In the old days, the Globex had its own session. It opened at 3:30, closed at 8:15. The U.S. market opened at 8:30, and it was a completely different environment. Now, if you have a futures platform, you can trade seamlessly with two exceptions. From 3:15 till 3:30, the futures close in the U.S. at 3:15. They reopen at 3:30, trade till 4:15. They close down. If you're in a position at 4:15 or before, when the market's open at 5 o'clock, you now have a margin call, and that's going to depend on the platform you're trading with. One E-mini, usually, if you roll over into the next day's trading with the contract, that's going to be $5,000 margin call. Most of them are, within a few $100s of each other. Day trading on the S&P contract, meaning if you get in a position at 5 tonight and go till 3:15 tomorrow in that position, and then keep it, and then when they reopen at 3:30, you still have it at 4:15. So in other words, if you buy an S&P tonight at 5:01 p.m. and you're still in it at 4:10 in the afternoon, but you're out of it by 4:15, it only costs you $500 per E-mini contract you want to trade. Does everyone understand that? Let me stop right here and be sure you understand at least that much about margin calls, because I don't want you to misunderstand and then get a $5,000 margin call because you didn't know these hours. And while you're doing that, or thinking about a question, I'm going to check the market. In case you're interested, I posted on the whiteboard we want to buy 98.50. Low of the nice 99 and a quarter. Now they're 2100.75. Incredible. Didn't miss it by much. All right, no questions about these hours, right? And I'll talk a little bit about some early trades we might put on and how these margin numbers are important for you to understand and remember. That's correct, Gail. In other words, if you want to carry a contract over to the next trading session, meaning after 5 o'clock, you probably have to have $5,000. I know OEC that I trade through requires, gain capital. They require $5,060 per E-mini contract to carry over. But you only need $500 to day trade. Which whiteboard are you looking at, Scott? The one in this room or the one in the trade room? There's nothing posted on the whiteboard in the classroom. If you look in the trade room, okay, we have a chat room that's a trade room. Let me be sure everyone understands that. We have 3 rooms, 2 that you should pretty much familiarize yourself with. We have the chat room or the trade room. That's the main room. That's where everyone is, and that's where we call our trades. The classroom is for teaching only. And the reason we have those separate rooms is a lot of folks, they've had this stuff. They want to trade. They want to focus on trading, okay? So check the whiteboard in the chat room. Now your $97 that you paid tonight gives you 30 days in the chat room. So by all means, you need to visit the chat room because that's the main reason, in my opinion, for being around here. Okay. You can log into the other room and monitor it and monitor this room at the same time. That's up to you. Okay, so this slide I think we've covered, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. This is a quick history of the years of the Globex. This is when the Globex concept was approved in 87. 92 is when you could trade currencies and interest rate products. I started trading in around 93. 95 is when you could trade index products. Then it was 2000. I thought it was 2004. I'm sorry. It's 2000 when you could get the Globex allows open access. And that's when we got rid of the Globex terminals and, we were able to just to trade off of a laptop or any computer. And you can see the growth of the volume. When I say that this is one of the fastest, most interesting growing markets, trust me, it is a market you need to know and understand, as you've heard me say, even if you're not going to trade it. Okay, so the differences between the Globex and the day market, we're going to try to talk about that, and they are very different. As I go through these slides tonight, you really need to keep an open mind. Even though we're trading the same E-mini contract that you trade during the day, it has different set of rules at night than it does during the day, and you will understand those as we go through these slides tonight. Okay, I think we all know we live in a 24-hour marketplace. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, other than to say that in addition to being able to trade in the Globex, if you have a portfolio and if you find that there's been a huge change in the global marketplace, markets crashing in China, default in Greece, Russia invades the Ukraine, a tsunami in Japan, the list goes on and on. This is a way for you to hedge your portfolio and at least maintain its value, maybe even make money off of the hedge if you play it right. All right, now, in the room at night, these are the other markets that we watch. Let me say it again. My philosophy is I trade one market, learn it well, and trade the one market. That is the E-mini. Secondly, the indicators that I have developed work best on the E-mini. For example, we'll talk about the dome later. If you try to use the dome on the NASDAQ or the Dow, it's just not going to work because there's not enough volume. But the E-mini contract gives you enough volume to get fills that you want, get good fills accurately, timely, and it works great on the dome. You may try to trade the bonds on the dome and you find out it's not going to be as efficient as the E-minis are on the dome. But we do look at the Dow, the NASDAQ, but we don't really focus on them because they're going to follow what the S&Ps are. Dow, the NASDAQ, but we don't really focus on them because they're going to follow what the S&Ps are doing anyway. We are looking for markets or events or news or indicators that move the S&P, period. That's all we're looking for. We don't need to get involved in a whole lot of minutia or other markets. We're only looking for that influences the S&P. That's the only market we're trading in the Globex. Now, if you want to trade the bonds, and I do position trade the bonds for my own account, and often members in the room will ask me what I'm doing with the bonds, but we do not call bond trades officially at night during the Globex session. Now, during the day, the guys may call a bond trade. They may call an oil trade. They may call a Dow or NASDAQ. They're all over the place during the day. They're not going to post to the whiteboard because, they're constantly talking and monitoring and trading during the day. It's a different environment than the environment at night. I already talked about Sunday nights. We do not call trades on Sunday nights, but the room is open. I'll tell you later why we do not call trades on Sunday nights. Okay, so these are the electronic trading hours for most of the markets. Again, I'm not going to go through this slide because I want to be sure we get through indicators and things you need to know that are more important tonight. Now, we break the market up into two sessions at night. We have what we call the Asian control, which goes from 5 o'clock till midnight. The controlling markets are the Hang Seng and the Nikkei. The Nikkei opens at 7. The Hang Seng opens at 8:15. Again, these are central times. Now, what'll drive you crazy, as it does me, is when we go back to standard time, Asian markets do not recognize daylight savings time. European markets do, but we'll adjust those times for you as we go. I'm not going to get into those tonight. Now, the Nikkei is the third largest economy in Japan. Was most recently the second till about a year and a half ago when China became the second largest economy. And the Hang Seng, which is the old Hong Kong markets, which most of you may not be familiar with. Hong Kong was a British possession, as many of you know. And most of the stocks on the Hong Kong exchange were mostly Western type of companies, particularly European type companies. Then we had the handover of Hong Kong to China. I forget the exact year. It seems to me it was around late 90s. I should know this because I was in Hong Kong 6 months before they handed it over to the Chinese. Most recently, the Chinese have opened up their markets to more than just, their citizens, and they're becoming less regulated on those markets, and are opening, like the Shanghai market, the China 8 shares. There's several different markets they have in China that are now being made available to people outside of China. But the Hong Kong market, being of Western roots, if you will, that is a market that affects the S&Ps, and that's why we follow it. So to summarize, the Asian markets are the dog, if you will, that wag the tail from 5 o'clock till midnight. Don't bother trying to look at the South Korean markets or Australian markets or Canadian markets. Yes, those are great economies. They just do not affect the S&Ps, so we do not watch those markets. European control starts at 12 midnight Central Time and goes till 5 a.m. in the morning. Once you get much past 5 a.m. in the morning, you start to get into the influence of the U.S. market. Traders are then positioning for, the opening of the U.S. and whatever news they may be. So the DAX and the FTSE are the two markets to watch during that time. Now, 85 to 90% of the time, tell me where the DAX is going, I'll tell you where the S&Ps are going. The majority of time, those two move like they're dating. They walk hand in hand down the street, as I like to say. The DAX, after about, 12:30, 1 a.m. in the morning, tell me where the DAX is going. I'll tell you where the S&Ps are going. Sometimes they'll diverge, as particularly here of late when we've had all this Greek news, because it has less of an effect on us than it does Europe. Okay? Now, you need to know, for example, tonight we have GDP on China coming out. That will be a market mover, and I'll tell you where to get that news and how to find it. But chances are someone in the chat room is going to post it and tell you what the news is. Okay. All right, these are the time zones. I've covered most of these, so I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. Just remember, you'll see some movement in the S&Ps around 7 before the Nikkei opens, 8:15 when the Hang Seng opens, 12:30 to 1 before the DAX opens, and at 2 a.m. before the European cash markets open. Those are the big time zones that you really need to know. Now, there are other little, what we call pivot times in the markets. I have a slide on that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, we talked about this a few minutes ago, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this slide. Key market times, we've talked about this. Again, if you're not aware of what's going on in this market, you're leaving some 17 hours of the 24-hour market on the table. That's why we created and started a 24-hour trade room, to align ourselves and you with the 24-hour marketplace. Okay. Now, many of you who trade during the day may notice there's a lot of activity in the market around 10:30. And in case you didn't know, that's when the European cash markets are closing. That's why you see some movement in the S&Ps. It's also important to make a note of where the S&Ps were trading around 10:30 when Europe closes, because that can give you some helpful hints as to how Europe may open at 1 a.m. We'll talk about that a little later as well. Okay, I'm going to stop right here for just a minute. Are there any questions about anything I've talked about so far? I'll stop about every 15 or 20 minutes and you can ask questions. So hold your questions till then. So any questions so far? No one has any questions so far. Well, that's great. Okay, on we go. Okay, now these are certain time zones and pivot points at night that we have identified that generally you can see some change in movement or change in direction in the S&Ps. So, for example, one that I will bring to your attention at the bottom, 12:30 a.m. If you see a rally into the 12:30 time zone, look for a bit of a pullback between 12:30 and 1 before the DAX opens. But you'll see a lot of activity in the market between 12:30 and 1 a.m. because that's just before the DAX market opens, and it will move the market. So you'll see a lot of movement in the S&Ps at that time. I don't have the link to the chat room, but you should have gotten in your subscription a link to the chat room. It's password protected, so you have to, use that in order to get in. Edith, the trial that you purchased, if you purchased it today or whenever, it was $97. It gives you 30 days access to the chat room and gives you this course and all the slides and webinars and presentations in our archives and documents. We have a library full of information by other moderators and traders. You get Dr. Stanley's options course. All that's available to you for the $97. You get 30 days in the trade room as part of this offering. Okay, now the slide in front of you is important. I want to call your attention to the forexfactory.com, forexpros.com, or Bloomberg. there's a website called Forex Factory you need to become familiar with. Spend a few minutes on it. It will tell you all you need to know if you're going to trade in the Globex. There's lots of information about time zones and when the markets are going to open, when there's news in the U.S. and, around the world, when a Fed governor, whether it's U.S. or in a foreign country, is speaking that could affect the markets, like Draghi with the ECB or Janet Yellen. They're on the calendar, and then there's a news site, and it's mostly for currency traders, but a few minutes on that site every night, maybe 5 minutes before the markets open, will make you a very intelligent trader and investor. So I highly recommend you look at those websites and familiarize yourself with them. From time to time, we'll refer to those as well. Okay, now here's one of the first things I want you to do when you join our trade room. As many of you have heard me say, that money management is as important as any of your trading techniques or disciplines. If you do not have a disciplined, steady money management system, you're not going to have consistent returns. If you do, you'll be one of the first that I've ever met. You've got to have a disciplined money management system. So this is what I want you to think about doing now that you've joined our chat room, whether you stay or not. This is information that you can use that will help you in a dramatic way. First thing I want you to do is set a goal, because everyone that's in our room, they're not in there, well, there may be some, I shouldn't say that are in there for what I call trading cowboys. But the majority of people that are in our room are in there to supplement their income, because that's what we do, and that's what we do a great job of. So set a goal. That's the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, a realistic goal, a goal of how much you want to supplement your income. And on this slide, we're going to use $2,000 as an example. Whether you want to make 4, 6, 8, that's up to you, but a realistic goal, and let's just say 2,000, because that's what most of the people in this room are trying to do. Now, once you set the goal, realistic goal, that backs you into everything else that you want to do with your trade discipline and your money management. All right, I cannot overemphasize this. This is one of the most important slides we can talk about tonight. So now you've set a goal of 2,000. Assume there are 20 trading days in every month, which, unless we have holidays around Christmas, whatever, that's about what we have. If your goal is to make $2,000 a month, that tells you your stops, that tells you how many contracts you need to trade. You don't need to trade 10 contracts to average $100 a day, for example. It's just taking way more risk than you need to take. So if your goal is to make $200 a day, you can do that by trading 2 contracts. All you have to do is average. Now, some days you're going to lose money. Some days, hopefully, you'll make more than 100. But if you're averaging $100 a day, which is not hard to do, guys and gals, then you can hit your goal. One of the most important aspects of this concept is when you hit your goal, you stop. You quit trading. You trade in a simulation account. You trade, for fun. You make little trades up in your mind and see if they work. But you don't trade real money once you hit your goal. You hit your goal and you stop. Go walk the dog. Go read a book. Go watch TV, whatever. Because if you keep trading, you overtrade. And if you overtrade, chances are you're going to make a mistake and give it back. So let me summarize. Whatever number of contracts you decide, you put them in a unit. So 2 contracts is a base unit. You want to trade multiple contracts because it gives you different levels in which to enter your orders on. For example, let's say we want to buy 2100. You can buy one at 2100, and then if it starts to sell off and you want to add on, you still have another contract. Or as I like to say, it's like hunting. You still have another bullet left in your gun. If you have one bullet and you fire it and you miss, you're done. But trading 2 contracts gives you the ability to stagger your entries, to stagger your exits, and to stagger your stops. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So let's say that we buy, well, let's go back. Let's say tonight we're going to sell, I put in the room, we're going to sell 2102 and a half. Okay. So let's say that you sell one unit at 2102 and a half, and then at 2102 you like the trade even better, you put on the second one. Now you've fulfilled your unit. You don't put on a third or fourth. You keep the unit. You keep the unit the same at all times. Okay? This is what gets traders in trouble. One minute they're trading two contracts. Next thing you know, they get overexcited or they get behind and they're trading six contracts. They have a huge loss, and then they're back to trading one contract trying to get back that loss. You have to keep your number of contracts or your unit the same at all times. Not to say that once you get your confidence up and you feel better about what you're doing, you can increase the size of your unit. But once you establish a unit, you stay with that unit at all times. If you get stopped out on the two contracts, that's your unit, you're done. You don't keep adding or subtracting. You look for another entry point maybe, but you don't just keep adding contracts to the unit and trying to work your way out of it. Now, if we sell a full unit tonight at 2102 and a half, for example, or let's say we stagger in, or we sell one at 2102 and a half, another one at 2102, you're now short your full unit. That's it. You're not going to add any more. Let's say they go to, as they did tonight, to 2099.50. Well, guess what? You just made 3 points. Those 3 points now that you have in the bank on one contract, you're up $150. You're above your goal. So if you wanted to leave one contract on to see if it's going to go lower, you can now bring your stop down so you can't lose money on the trade. That's a very important concept and money management tool that we use in this room, because sometimes you think it might go lower and you want to keep one contract on, and we call that a runner. You probably heard that term before. You bring your stop down on the one contract you have remaining because you just made 3 points on your first contract. Now you can't lose money if you bring your stop down to a break even. In other words, somewhere around 2102 and a half. So if it goes back up, no matter what, you made 3 points. Okay? That's a great position to be in. Basically, you can't lose money on the night. All right, any questions about money management so far? This is extremely important. I cannot overemphasize a disciplined money management system. Gail, we usually use, and that's a good question, thank you. We usually use a 2 to 2.5 point. Sometimes, depending on where the markets have found support or resistance, we may use a 3-point stop. So I will give you a stop when I give you a trade. We always use a stop. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Once you determine your size of your unit, your goal of how much you're trying to make, it solves several problems. It solves the problem of over trading. It solves a problem of trading too many or not enough contracts. It solves a lot of trading mistakes that traders make. So money management is very important. It also helps you determine your stop. Why would you use a 5 or 6 point stop when you're trying to make $100, for example? You can be successful in the Globex using 2.5, 3 point stops. How do I know that? Because we do it. All right, any questions about money management? So again, you want to try to trade multiple contracts with inside whatever your unit is. Typically, your unit's one unit with two contracts in it, and I'll say buy a half contract. I mean, buy a half unit and sell a half unit. I will post that in the room, or I will say it in my communication in the chat room. And we just talked about this for the most part. Okay, I know this is mental. This is the mental part of trading. And as many of you know, there's a lot to the emotions and psychology when you're a trader. And if you treat this as a process, you minimize your risk, increase your probabilities on a trade. That's what we try to do. Don't overtrade, reach your goal, quit for the day. Reward yourself on a regular basis by taking money out of your account. These are little mental things that you can do that reinforce the mental side or the emotional side of trading. Think about this. You spend a lot of money trying to learn how to trade, webinars and education, and you spend money trying to learn, the discipline of trading, and you sit in front of a screen all day or all night or both. In my case, you your emotions are being taxed, like all of us, because these markets can test you, as we all know. Reward yourself by taking some money out of your account on a regular basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, that's up to you. Because now you're like a golfer or you're like a tennis player or any other professional. When you do something on a regular basis and you do it with discipline and you do it over and over and over again, in other words, you do those things you find success with, then you reward yourself for your success and you're more apt to do those things the way you've always done them in a disciplined way. So there's a lot to this slide on a mental and emotional basis to reinforce your discipline of not only how to trade, but money management as well, because you'll find yourself probably stepping outside the boundaries from time to time of your discipline, and you'll say to yourself, I shouldn't have done that, I know better. But reward yourself for your efforts, because trust me, it can be a huge psychological boost, and that way you're more apt to do the things that made you successful over and over and over again. Pavlov's dog. We've all heard of Pavlov's dog. Okay, now these Greek isms are kind of confusing. Do not confuse the Greek isms with the indicators. Greek isms are just general events or signals that I've observed in all these years of trading the Globex that happen, and they happen about 80% of the time. So if you can find something, as many of you have heard me say, that occurs at least 80% of the time, even 75% of the time, but if you can find something that occurs 80% of the time in the Globex, or any market for that matter, you can make money with it. If someone tells you they have an indicator that works 100% of the time, I would question it in a big way, because I don't know of such. So I ask you to keep in mind that these are just general observations to keep in the back of your mind when you're navigating or trying to trade this market, okay? There's some 15 or 16 of these, uh, and we'll talk about those tonight as well. Then you have your indicators in addition to your Greek isms. The way we analyze this market is different from the daytime, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So you want to observe market conditions, what the markets did during the daytime, because that's information you can use in which to trade at night. The information you gather at night can help you trade during the day session. Which financial futures we trade at night, we've talked about that. It's the S&P. We're going to talk about these useful tools and indicators and the websites we've already talked about. We went through that a few minutes ago where we looked at it. This is kind of repeat. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this one. All right. This is an important slide. This is, make a real mental note of this, or however you make notes. This is the process that I go through each and every night when I'm trying to find a trade for the room. Now, let me quantify that. We have a lot of traders in the room who are new to We have a lot of traders in the room who are new to trading. We have traders in the room who are very experienced, and they know what they want to do. They're just in the room for a little help, or like a comfortable crutch to lean on, as I like to say. But we have different levels of experience in the room, from people who have never traded futures, maybe never traded anything, to very experienced traders. So when I call a trade, I'm looking for high probability, low risk trades. That's what I have to do in order, to accommodate the different levels of experience in the room. I think everyone can understand that. Sometimes you may find me being a little bit more conservative than most traders. This is the process that I go through. Having said that, I watch the market during the day. I watch the market at night, as many of you have heard me say. And I do use charts during the day, but I do not use charts at night. So you'll ask me, do I use a 5-minute chart, or do I use Renko bars, or do I use candlesticks, or whatever? I do not use charts at night. I use the dome. The dome is my chart. The dome is my volume indicator. And if you learn to use the dome, depth of market is what it's called on most platforms, or a matrix, or what have you. In the Globex, it will become your most important and primary indicator. But you have to have some resistance and support numbers that work well. Then the dome is an additional tool to help you with those. So I watch the market. For example, tonight I see some selling when it gets to 2102, and I've seen some buying when we get to 2099. And I make notes of those throughout, the quarter that we're trading on that particular contract. Now, you can do the same thing if you want to, looking at charts. Most people in the room will tell you my numbers are pretty good, and I develop these numbers by watching the markets. I have learned over the years that when you're looking at a chart, remember one thing: everyone else is looking at the same chart and deriving the same numbers. Now, 90% of the time, 80% of the time, my numbers and the numbers on charts are probably going to be very close, but not all the time. So I develop numbers by watching where the selling comes in and where the buying comes in during the course of the day and the night. It's harder during the day because of the volatility, but at night, it's something you can visibly identify. All right, so if, let's say, I want to sell 2102.5 tonight, which is what I posted on the whiteboard. If we approach 2102.5, the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the dome, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the dome and how that works in a minute. Then after I look at the dome, I'm going to look at the international market that is in play that will affect the S&P at that time of night, whether it's the Nikkei or the Hang Seng or the DAX or the FTSE, depends on the time of night. Then I want to make sure I'm not stepping into a news event. Like there's a confidence news that comes out in Germany called ZEW, Z-E-W, which we had last night. It's basically a survey of German companies and what their upper management thinks about the economy. In Germany, it's a big deal. Okay? It's a market mover. It was a market mover this morning. Then I want to look and see if we're, in one of these pivots or time zones, again, that can also affect the markets. Like, is the DAX about to open? Because a lot of times, if it's 15 minutes to 1, the DAX is about to open. I know that's a volatile, unpredictable time of night, and I'm going to hold off and wait and see how it actually opens. Okay, so let me go through those again. Support and resistance numbers that I use, that I develop on my own. I'm not using the ones off of charts. By watching the markets trade during the day. Very next thing I'm going to do is look at the dome, which I'm going to tell you how to read the dome here before we quit tonight. Then I look to see not where the Hang Seng or the Nikkei are trading. I'm looking at the plus or minus. If I want to sell the market and the Nikkei is up 200 points and it starts to sell off, I want to know, I'm not really interested in trying to plot the Nikkei itself. I only want to know is the market starting to sell off or is it in a rally mode by watching the plus and minus on the Nikkei or the Hang Seng or the DAX or the FTSE. Then I want to make sure I've checked the news. I'm not stepping in front of a news item. I want to make sure that, I'm not, stepping into a pivot or a time, where the markets are known to move. All right, I want to stop there just for a second to see if there are any questions. Paul, are there any services that give and sell resistance and support levels that you would, Paul, there are hundreds of them. In fact, I've had members of my room say, why don't you just publish your support and resistance numbers? Because I don't want to sound egotistical, but they're good numbers. But, you can get these, I mean, they're a dime a dozen. I mean, there are all sorts of services that offer you support and resistance numbers. But I will tell you, I think you can get all the numbers you need as part of your membership in our chat room, especially with West Coast Roy. West Coast Roy will give you these numbers that he develops from what he calls volume profile and Murray lines. And he'll say, okay, if it gets through 2102, next level's 2105. And, between the numbers you get from Roy, the numbers you get from me, you don't need to go out and spend any money. I think that's will do what the job you need. Okay, it's not a German news site. SY, I'm not sure what SY stands for, but it is a website called forexfactory.com. And there's Forex News and there's Forex Calendar. You can find that website and study it. It is a wealth of information. All right, we're trading 2102, someone said. Oh, we're 2103. Okay. So we busted through the 2102 and a half high. Hang on one second. Let me go talk to the room. We'll put you on hold for just a second. Okay, what you're seeing right now in the trade room is the Hang Seng's about to open, and this is one of those where the market's moving into the Hang Seng, and the S&Ps are telling you the Hang Seng is going to gap open. I don't even need to know what the Hang Seng is going to do. I just know it's going to gap up based on the way the S&Ps are trading. That is the reason we do not put in limit orders, even though I thought 2102.5 was a good place to sell them, because sometimes it can go right through your number. So once again, that's why I say when it gets to the number that we're interested in buying or selling, we look at the dome. And right now, the dome is positive, and the S&Ps are moving up with a positive dome. And I'll talk about that in a minute because you're going to ask me, well, what does that mean? And I'm going to tell you tonight before we leave this room. I just typed in the room to sell 2105 on a limit order, in case you're interested in following the trade. The stop on the trade, I posted it in the room's 2107 3/4. Scott, again, let me be sure you understand this. This is important. If you log into the chat room and it says we're looking now is the operative word to buy or sell. In this case, it said we're looking to sell 2102.5. That means if and when it gets there, we're going to look at the indicators to see if we want to make the trade. In this case, it went right through that number because it's anticipating either some kind of news event or there is news on the Hang Seng. In other words, the GDP on the Hang Seng is due out tonight, and my experience has been typically in a communist country like China, that news has a tendency to get out. So let me say that again. If you see a number on the whiteboard that says looking to sell 2102.5, that means if it gets there, you're on notice that we may sell it there. I'll come on if it gets there and say, okay, here's what we're doing. In this case, it went through 2102.5. It's telling me the Hang Seng is going to gap up. It's telling me that someone has some information about this GDP number, and it's telling me that we need to try to sell them at a higher price. My next level is 2105, which, by the way, is today's high, 2105.5, and is also an overhead number that I have. All right, are there any questions about the process I go through to look for a trade? Now, on this slide at the bottom, unlike the market during the day where you don't know how far down it can go or how far up it can go, generally speaking, one of the advantages of trading in the Globex is it has some ranges that you can usually trade by. Not always, but usually. For example, you usually see a 1 to 5 point range in the Globex during the Asian session. Well, tonight the high is 2104, the low is 2099. There you have it. That's right at about a 5 point trading range so far. Now, when there's news, of course, that can change as it did with the Greek news. Throughout most of the evening, the high and the low, from the lowest trade on the Globex to the high, is about 12 points, 10 to 12. So, in other words, if you're thinking about putting on a trade and you're thinking about selling the S&Ps, and we have had a low and a high that's 12-point range, then you have a high probability of a successful trade selling a 12-point trading range. Does that make sense? Okay, the Hang Seng is open, is up 120 points, so it did gap up. But based on the way this is trading, somebody knows that GDP number, I guarantee it. You want to tell me in a system like China has that news doesn't get out? It's not like we have here in the U.S. And I mean, it gets out here in the U.S. sometimes. Okay. I said earlier that at 10:30 is when the European markets in Europe close, the cash markets, not the futures. So let me give you an example. Here in the U.S., we have Dow futures and we have the Dow, cash Dow. Cash Dow closes at 3. The Dow futures trade till 3:15, as many of you may know. Also, the Dow futures trade throughout the night in the Globex. The cash Dow does not. Every future has a cash or a base component to it. So if the Dow futures rally 200 points in the course of the night, which we have seen lately with all this craziness in Europe, let's say that the Dow futures go up 150 points. Keep in mind now, the Dow cash has been closed this entire time. Well, at 8:30 in the morning, when the cash Dow opens, what is it going to do? It's going to line itself with its future. So if the Dow futures are up 150 points throughout the course of the Globex at night, look for the cash Dow in the morning to open up 150 points. It's the same with the European markets. The cash markets close at 10:30, but the futures in Germany and the futures in London continue to trade till 3 o'clock Central Time. So by calculating this move, if it's been a big spread since the close, it helps you figure out how the European markets are going to open, which can give you a huge leg up when you're trying to figure out what the S&Ps are going to do. So if you see a run up to the high tick in the last hour of trading on the S&Ps, look for it to fade back a couple of points. In fact, we did it tonight, did it last night. If you have a quick sell-off into the lows, low tick the last hour of trading, you can expect a real quick bounce when the Globex opens. Okay, unlike the market during the day, as I said, there are typical moves at night that can help you when you're trading. If you see the Nikkei with this slide, and I'm not going to go through every one of these, I'm just going to give you an example. If you see the Nikkei up or down 200 points, that's about typical right now with all the QE that's going on in China and the Hang Seng in Japan, China, and the Nikkei in Japan. But if you see the Nikkei up or down 300 points, you know there's something unusual going on, and that tells you you should be on alert that there's either news or news that's about to come out. And that's how you use this slide. I'm not going to go through all these, but you can just keep it handy for future reference because we're starting to run out of time. An extreme move on the DAX. Now, I've had to put these X's on the Hang Seng and the Nikkei is because the other night we had the Hang Seng down 2,000 points. Well, obviously that's extreme. And then a couple of nights later, it went up 1,500. Those are extreme moves, and you know something unusual is going on, and to be very careful with your trading. Okay, we have a positive dome, so I look for these S&Ps to bounce a little higher. You want to follow and see what they do. We've also posted moves for the bonds, the currencies, and the dollar. And again, just use this slide as a reference to look at. We've talked about this slide. The Hang Seng futures opened at 8:15, and what did you see? A run up in the S&P into the futures and the Hang Seng opening. Okay, now generally speaking, depending on whether there's news in one market or another, or with all the QE that's going on, if the BOJ in Japan's making an announcement, but let's just talk about on an average night, the Nikkei is the market moving the S&Ps until the Hang Seng opens. We provide you with real-time Singapore quotes. That's the only way to get real-time quotes on the Nikkei at night and the Hang Seng at night. You can find some websites that'll give you quotes, but they're not real-time. They're delayed 10 or 15 minutes, and that can hurt you. So don't fall into that trap. John, if you will table that question, I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. Again, this is one of those slides that is kind of self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through it. I'm trying to get to the signals and indicators, which I think, and the tools you'll need to use the room. That's what I'm trying to get to tonight. Like I said, if we need to do this another night, we'll do it. I'm not going to leave you hanging. It's a lot of information to absorb in a couple of hours. I know that. All right, these are the various symbols on the various futures contracts. You can look these up on your platform. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. This is what we project in the trade room at night. You check into the chat room or the trade room, as we call it. This is what you're going to see. You're going to see some Renko bars on the right. Like I said, they're not as effective at night as they are during the day. The guys do use them during the day. You're going to see that purple bar on the right, which is the Dome-O-Matic. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Over on your left, you're going to see the quotes for the Asian session and the European session. Most platforms you have to pay to get these quotes. We give them to you in the room as part of your membership. You could pay $30, $40, $50 a month just for those quotes. So that's we think, a bargain in itself. You have to have real-time quotes if you're going to trade in this space at night. All right, this is again a bigger view of the chart and the dome. So here we go. Again, this is right up there with money management. This is important. On your left, you see a dome. This is what most of you should see on your platforms. That is a ninja dome. You see it has 5 levels of bid and ask. Of course, the ninja dome says buy and sell. Most of them will have bid and ask at the top. Over on the right, you see that purple bar. It has an arrow. Now this is a stagnated slide. This is not an active slide. This says this slide had the dome at 1.31 times a ratio of 1. In other words, the volume of down on the dome, the negative side, was 1.38 to 1. So let me just say it easily so you'll understand this, and it's not complicated. The dome is your best friend at night. So let me just make a couple of comments about the dome. The dome is your most effective indicator from 5 Central Time in the evening till 5 in the morning. Once you get outside of those time parameters, it's not an effective indicator. It is most effective on the S&Ps. It's not as effective on the bonds or the currencies or others at night, but it works very well with the S&Ps. The dome can help you determine when to get in a trade. It can help you in terms of staying out of a trade. In other words, like tonight, When we went through that 21.5, I looked at the dome. The dome was telling me we're going higher, and it's telling me right now we're still going higher. That's what it's saying right this minute anyway. Now let me tell you why the dome is telling me we're going higher. The dome is a volume indicator. It's that simple. And the dome and the E-minis on the dome gravitate towards the volume. Okay? So if you have more volume on the ask, look for the S&Ps to go up, or that's a positive dome. If there's more volume on the bid or the buy side, that means the numbers are lower. If you have more volume on the bid, then look for the S&Ps to gravitate towards the volume to the downside. The S&Ps will gravitate towards the volume. Most people who have ever traded or traders in the Globex think the volume can act as resistance. If you see a lot of volume, it's quite the opposite. It acts as a magnet. Do not look at time and sales. Between 5 at night and 5 in the morning, let me say it again, the only thing you really want to look at is the dome. I'm not saying not to look at time and sales, Walter. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm not saying don't use charts. You know, if you use whatever tool that works for you, that helps you, use it. I'm just telling you at night, this dome can be your best friend. Now, the dome, obviously, can change directions. So if you see it going from positive to neutral, that's when you want to put on a trade generally, because chances are it may go from neutral to negative, and now you're short and you have yourself a good trade. Can it go from positive to neutral, then back to positive? Sure it can, and does. But if you can watch the dome and see that it's starting to trend towards from positive, which is what we've had, when the dome ran up to 21.04 1/4, we had a positive dome. Remember me saying that. And now the dome is starting to soften up and get back more towards a neutral stance, and the S&Ps have dropped a little bit. Trust me, watch this dome, watch the volume, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You don't have to take my word for it. This indicator will speak for itself. Now, the dome-o-matic, which is just what that stands for, that's a little tool to the right that will figure out the volume for you. It will tell you whether it's a negative dome or positive dome. All you have to do is follow that little, you see the little purple arrow, all you have to, or purple or chartreuse, whatever that is, just follow that arrow. If it goes up and it turns green, you now have a positive dome. And it'll give you the ratio on the dome, whether it's 2 to 1, 1.5 to 1. So it kind of calculates the dome automatically. Now this is a Ninja feed, and we are a Ninja affiliate. We get this from Ninja. Now, are there any questions about the dome? Because if you don't understand it, please ask, because it's important. Again, if you try to use the dome during the day, it's just not going to work for you. If you try to use it on other markets other than the S&P, there's not enough volume to drive it. It works best on the S&Ps. It works best between the hours of 5 in the evening and 5 in the morning. Sam, John just, I think, answered your question. So more volume on the ask means price should go up. This is not a 100% indicator, but should, yes. Right now, we have a dome that is positive. So we'll see if the S&Ps go up on that dome. Maria, where do I see the percentages? It's not percentages, it's a ratio. On the Dome-O-Matic, you'll see like a 1.4 to 1. That's how you read it. So that means there's 1.4 times the volume on the downside than there is the upside. The dome-o-matic just figures out the dome automatically. And Gail, you're on Thinkorswim. Is that what that is? TOS? I think they call that dome a matrix. I'm not sure. Thinkorswim has active trader. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry has become a great interpreter, if you will, of the dome. She has quickly become the queen of the dome. In fact, I might let her start teaching a course on the dome, or ask her if she will. Paul, this is an 80% indicator. And one of the reasons it works better at night is because it does not change directions and has the volatility like it does during the day. That is why it doesn't work well during the day. There's just too much volatility. Now, I said just a minute ago that we have a positive dome, so I look for the S&Ps. Doesn't mean they're going to go up 3 or 4 points, but I look for them to go up before they go down is what I'm saying. We have a positive dome, and they just ticked up to 2103 and 3/4 from 2103 and 1/4. So if the dome continues to get more positive, the higher they'll move. Paul, what are you using now? Okay, try to learn to use your trade station. Sherry, what did you say trade station is? It's called a matrix. The Dome-O-Matic, if you're a Ninja subscriber, you can't get the Dome-O-Matic. That is a Ninja product that's something we help them develop that's unique to our room. $21.03 and 3/4. We still have a positive dome. Guys and gals, you can look at the dome just as Sherry said, and in a quick few seconds determine whether it's a positive or negative dome. A lot of times you can put most of your domes will give you what they call an auto sum, and it'll sum up the number of contracts. For example, right now I have a Gain Capital or OEC dome. It's telling me that there are 1,681 contracts on the ask and 1,149 on the bid. It's okay to use those totals as long as you don't have a big number of contracts embedded in that number somewhere. Scott, the Dome-O-Matic is available to you in the trade room. And you want to look at the first 5 levels because that'll tell you what you need to know. If you want to look at 10, that's okay. Remember this, all of the domes or matrix or whatever you call them that you have on your platform are going to have the same numbers because they get the same feed. It's from the CME. They all get the same feed. It's just a different way of the way the domes are presented, but the numbers will be the same. Doesn't matter what platform you use. That's right, Wayne. 1680 on the ask, 1155 on the bid. You've got it. All right, any questions about the dome? Trust me when I tell you. Sherry, would you say the dome is a very important indicator at night? If you play with your matrix or your dome or whatever they call it on your platform, you may find out you can get the sum totals and you can program it. On the gain capital dome, there's a gear at the top left-hand corner. If you click on that, it allows you to, set your dome the way you want it. All right, we're trading 2104, and we have 1600 on the ask and 1100 on the bid. And I said to you a few minutes ago, I'm not trying to be egotistical. I'm just trying to tell you this thing works. So now we're trading 2104 because we have a positive dome where we have more volume to the ask than we do the bid. I don't make this stuff up, I promise you. Gail, that's why you take this course. Hopefully, as I said earlier today, we say something or show you something that you didn't know about. Paul, you shouldn't have to pay for it. I think, it's just a setting on your dome. I've never seen a platform, charge you for that. If they do charge you, you need to move to another platform. My dome is 10 deep. I'm using 10 deep, but as I said, you can use 5. I'm going to stick my head in the chat room for a minute. I'll be right back. Sherry, you help them on the dome if you don't mind, please. All right, Sherry. Thank you, darling. I appreciate that. All right. Any questions before we move on about the dome? Well, I don't have to do anything now. You've got Gertrudis and Sherry in there. They can tell you more than I can. Paul, an OEC dome is a dome with gain capital. It is just like a Ninja or a Thinkorswim. What kind of platform do you have, Edith? Okay, I'm not familiar with TradeStation or Infinity's an IB, I think. That's not a platform. Sherry may can help you with that one too. Sherry is an example of the kind of folks we have in our room that I've been talking about, and Gertrudis. They both will go out of their way to help you, as most of them in there will. But Sherry's really become pretty good with this dome stuff. I might have to give her see if I can get her to teach a course on nothing but the dome. What do you think, Sherry? Okay. All right, guys and gals, let's move on. We're running out of time. Now, these Greek isms, again, are just basic trade signals. They're classic nighttime trade setups. And, what most folks do is they just kind of, have these basically. I know somebody that put them on 3x5 cards. I know someone that printed them out and just keep them by their computer. I know some people that have memorized them. I know some people who just ask. Hang on, I just saw something on the Hang Seng. Okay, you can see where we were talking about this dome. Now we're trading 2104.5 because we have more volume to the ask than the bid. Okay, Greek isms are observations that I've watched over the years. As I said, these are events or signals that happen about 80% of the time, so they're just basic probabilities of certain events that occur. They're not 100%, and do not confuse them with the indicators. It's different. All right, Greekism number one. Sunday night is the most unpredictable night of the week. That's why we do not call trades on Sunday nights. This past Sunday is a prime example. We opened at 2062, went down to 2055, rallied from 2055 up to 2070 something, in a matter of hours. And it's because there's a lot of traders who are not in the room that are usually there on Sunday night, so it's light volume. Anytime you have light volume, the moves are more exaggerated. Reason number two, you don't have the continuity that you have from one trading session to the next. In other words, like tonight, the markets closed at 4:15. They reopened at 5 o'clock, so you only had 45 minutes, of a break in there versus a whole weekend where, the entire world can change over a weekend, as they did with Greece. Greekism number one, Sunday nights are very unpredictable. I'm not saying you shouldn't trade on Sunday nights, just something for you to know that it's light volume and it's more difficult to trade when you have light volume and you don't have that continuity. Now, Greekism number two, trade setups. Let's say that you have the market opens down from Friday's close. So on Sunday night, let's say they closed on Friday at 2100. They opened down a couple of points, on Sunday. If they reverse by 1 point, meaning they go 1 point above the 2100, chances are they're going to continue to go in the other direction. Same token on the sell side. Gertrude, I don't know. I'm thinking about pulling it. It's just that 2105 is a big number and the Hang Seng's selling off. Let me just tell the room to let's pull that order and let's just wait. I think that's going to be the safest thing to do. All right, folks, I'll be with you in just a minute. Let me take care of this. Okay, Greekism number two. Here's an example of how that trade may go. We just talked about that. Greekism number three. All these are on this. You can get this recording, so don't worry about it. You can and this stuff's in our archives. It's in our documents folder, our library as we call it. So you can always get this and study them at your leisure. You get a gap opening. Wait a few minutes. If it's right on the opening, and usually it's a good shorting opportunity. You may not want to stay in because, like for example, this trade, let's say that the S&Ps close at 415, at 430, an Apple or an IBM or an Intel that announces earnings between 4 and 430, they come out. If they had great earnings like we have seen with Apple, Apple gaps up because it's a Dow and a NASDAQ and an S&P stock. It affects those indices. So you'll see the S&Ps run up on the opening. Wait about 15 minutes. You can sell them. Look at the dome. Use that, of course, as a tool, and maybe scalp a point or two. It's not a trade for you to stay in for a complete reversal. It's just when you see a gap up into the Globex on news now, on news, you can sell it and usually scalp a point or two. Greekism number 4. If the market closes, we did this last night, at the top of the range of the last hour of trading, you can go ahead and sell them into the close, carry them over. Sometimes you can sell them right on the opening if you don't have enough margin in your account, and scalp a point or two. One of my favorite trade setups, right, Gertrudis? Again, if you see the S&Ps close at the top of the range of the last hour of trading, a lot of times you have a good setup for a quick scalp in the Globex. Greekism number 5, holiday trading. It's usually very thin because most traders have bugged out for the holidays, like July the 4th. Keep in mind, Great Britain, last time I checked, does not celebrate our Independence Day. So, they're trading in Europe. So even though the markets in the U.S. are closed, the Globex a lot of the time is open and trading. So when you have holiday trading, just know that it's light volume, so the trading can be more exaggerated, and usually that's a time when some traders that have the ability to buy a lot of contracts will try a short squeeze. Greekism number 6. If you had a big sell-off in the U.S. market, then you can expect Asia to open down, right? What affects us here in the U.S. affects them in Asia. What affects them in Asia affects Europe. What affects Europe can affect us. So if you've had a big sell-off in the U.S., expect the the Asian markets to open down. Well, the S&Ps have already discounted that event. So you can't wait till the Nikkei opens down at 7 o'clock and say, okay, I'm going to sell the S&Ps. It's too late. The S&Ps will have already discounted the Asian markets opening down. They'll sell off early, and in actuality, when the Globex Asian markets open, the S&Ps will probably rally. If the Nikkei opens down 250, 300 points, well, it's all bets are off. There's something else going on. We talked about this 1030 trade, using it to calculate how the markets open from 1 to 2. Greekism number 7. Greekism number 8, the Monday after options expiration, Friday, they normally open up. Now, one of the reasons for this is there's still a lot of position squaring going on after the options expiration on Friday, and it usually causes an upward bias in the S&Ps. Does not happen 100% of the time, but 80, 85% of the time, the Monday after options expiration Friday, not to say they're going to be up all day, but they could open up in the morning. Again, why is this important? Because if you're trading Sunday night, knowing this information can help you position on a Sunday night if you're trading. Last Monday, this Greekism held true. Greekism number 9. When you have Japan or China or the DAX in Europe on holiday, you have thin volume, and again, they grind higher. Short, squeeze the shorts. All right, I'm going to stop right here for a minute. Any questions? Now, generally speaking, folks, what will happen is that someone in the room will see a Greekism or a signal, and they'll bring it to your attention. They'll say, okay, today is options Monday. On a Sunday night, someone may say, okay, they may open up in the morning. All right, any questions whatsoever? All right, on Thursday nights, before a big news item on a Friday, what do we normally have on Friday? We have the employment numbers. Look for it to be very thin, very quiet. If the news is expected to be, positive, it looks like they're expecting, uh, a good employment number, like something in the 250, 300,000 range. You'll start to see the S&Ps rally during the European session, anticipating that news. I think this is self-explanatory. Just like last night, I told the room, we have J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo and Johnson & Johnson's earnings at 6:30 in the morning, expected to get really quiet, and it did until we had that retail number came out. Ed's in 4 minutes. Also, too, guys and gals, this is another little hint. It's not a Greekism, but news has a tendency to get out early in China. And think about this. You have 17 to 18 nations in the European Union, countries. Each country has everything from a finance minister to a European representative to this to that. So there's like 10 or 12 representatives from each country that are in the finance ministers or the ECB or whatever committee they're on in the Eurozone. You want to tell me that that news doesn't get out with that many people having knowledge of it? Give me a break. So a lot of times you will find that European news, the important news, can get out early as well. You don't have to take my word for it. Just watch the markets trade before the news comes out. All right. If you see the S&P stay within a range early in the night, stays near its lows or stays near its highs, if you see the S&P, for example, like right now we're at 2104 near the highs, and they hold this 2104 into the European session, chances are they're going higher. It's that simple. If you see them hanging near their lows and we start to get close, to a European market opening or another major event or news event, look for them to go lower. It's that simple. I don't know how many times this happens. The night before futures roll over, look for an upward bias in the S&Ps. Had it last month, had it in the June contract. We had it uh, March contract. I know those two. We had a big rally on a Wednesday night before they rolled them over. Don't ask me why. I know there's a lot of, people selling one contract and buying another. I guess that's a reasonable explanation, but that doesn't fit to me. That's the explanation, but it just doesn't make sense. All right, the Shanghai Composite's up 1.6%. The Chinex is up 1.9%. Excuse me, down. The Shanghai is down 1.2%. So all the internal Chinese markets are negative. The Hang Seng's the only one I see up. 8 shares. 8 shares are up. Now, this is fairly important. I can't tell you how many times there's been a big move in the S&Ps, and I'm trying to figure out whether it's a real move or it's, some shenanigans going on. Shenanigans can be like one time we had some rookie trader at some desk bought 250 contracts instead of 25, or was it 2,500? I don't remember. ran the S&Ps up 20 points. And, we're all scratching our heads thinking, okay, someone knows something we don't. Here's the beauty of the Globex. When you see a big move in the S&Ps to the upside or the downside, look at the currencies, especially the dollar or the euro. See if there's a flight to quality. Look at the Nikkei. Look at the bonds. These are all markets that can give you some helpful hints as to what's really going on. So again, if you see a huge sell-off in the S&Ps and you're thinking, is this really bad news? Look at the dollar, because the dollar will tell you quickly. It's a flight to quality instrument like the bonds are. Many of you have heard of that term, flight to quality. All right, GDP's out, better than expected. So I'm imagining that and you see when I was telling you about the market moving up, somebody knew that number. Don't tell me they didn't. Now we see how far this news takes it, and then we find a place to sell. So we want to fade this news, okay? I told the room to go flat and go to the sidelines and wait for the news to come out. I hope they don't hit this 2105 and then sell off. 7% is a 0.5% better. They were looking for 6.5. All right, we're 2106 already. The dome is very positive. Trying to trade 2107, next overhead. See how it's moving? This is why, ladies and gentlemen, you want to know what's going on in the Globex, because it can affect your money. All right, any questions? About anything we've talked about? Now, look, you have 30 days in our chat room, our trade room. A lot of this will become clearer to you if you spend some time in our trade room. It's part of your $97. Take advantage of it. We want to see you in the trade room. Join us, and you'll see how we apply some of these different indicators and signals that we talked about tonight. All right, any questions whatsoever? Now, the first Tuesday of every month, I have a tutorial on how to trade the Globex, which will reinforce some of this we talked about tonight. It's part of your membership in the room. And then in a couple of weeks, John Anders is going to have a course on teaching credit spreads. And then probably in another couple of weeks, Dr. Stanley will have a course on one of his specialties. And then we'll try to get West Coast Roy to do a couple of hours on Murray lines and volume profile. Guys and gals, listen to me on this now. The volume on the dome has been positive all night, telling you that the Hang Seng was probably going higher and the S&Ps are going higher. So you see, you can't use this dome during the day. Here's a huge tool that can help you at night that is useless during the day. Walter, we only have one Roy now. The East Coast Roy had a baby, his wife did, and that's their first child, and he's starting to travel more with his job, so he's taking a sabbatical from the trade room. John, the first Tuesday or any of the classes that we have usually go from about 7 to 8:30 or 9. But the one that you can count on is the first Tuesday of every month. The others will just let you know by email that we've scheduled them. Now, if you're trying to trade this, watch the dome. It's 1,800 to 1,000 contracts on bid and ask. When you see that dome start to roll over, and if you're at an overhead number like 2107, pull the plug. Make the trade. The Hang Seng's only up 85 points. That's amazing. Yeah, we probably can fade this trade. It's just a question of whether it's the big number I have is at 2108. That's where I have big overhead coming in. All right, I'm going to head to the trade room, see if I can help these folks make some money. Any more questions? Jim, can I discuss the managed futures accounts? Yes. Um, these are accounts that I trade. I make the decisions. They're generally people who don't want to stay up all night or don't want to make the decisions on their own. They'd rather I do it. And I put the orders in. It's $150 a month per S&P contract that you want traded with a $10,000 minimum. So if you want me to trade one S&P contract for you, you put up $10,000 and I enter the order and make the decisions on what to buy and sell. I'm more aggressive. I use wider stops. For example, in the room we use 2.5 to 3. I use 5 to 10 point stops. And I am more aggressive. The returns are available for your review. We have a legacy account that we have to report to the Futures and Exchange Commissions as to what our returns are. We're one of the few that are willing to show our returns. And our legacy account started with 20 grand 14 months ago, and it's at 33,000. If you're interested, you contact Jeff Sabbath. We'll get you, email us, our support folks, and we'll give you his email address, and you can contact him, and he'll call you and run through all the ifs and buts and whys and wheres. Does that answer your question? Come on, 2108. Catherine, I hope it's been beneficial. It's important to us that, well, it's important to anyone that does what we do that we give you a good educational basis from which to work with us on. If you're successful, we'll be successful. It's that simple. Randy, where are the numbers posted? What numbers in particular? The legacy account, if you contact Jeff Sabbath, he will furnish you with the legacy account numbers. They might be on the website. If they're not, I think I can't remember. But he'll send it to you. He'll send you an actual statement. All right, guys and gals, I know I threw a lot at you in a couple of hours, but if you spend a little time in the chat room and make one of those first Tuesdays of the month, all this stuff will come back into focus for you. Barbara, you're welcome. All right, I'm headed to the trade room.